Today's guest had to escape and immigrate from Iran to be here. On today's edition of the Thrive Time Show, our guest shares how he was able to escape and immigrate from Iran, how he was able to overcome drug addiction en route to growing an 18-dealership automotive empire, which he sold for over $10 million. On today's show, our guest shares with us why he believes that most people don't plan and why you absolutely need to become a planner in order to succeed in the world of business. He explains the value of wowing your customers. He explains why you should never retain bad employees. Today's guest started from the bottom in Iran, and now he's here.
Some shows don't need a celebrity narrator to introduce the show, but this show does. 2 men, 8 kids, co-created by 2 different women, 13 multi-million-dollar businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Thrive Time Show.
Now, 3, 2, 1, here we go!
Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, now we here.
Yes, and yes. Thrive Nation, on today's show, we're going to be interviewing a man who has overcome some serious adversity en route to achieving his success. And a man who has grown a car, tire, and auto dealership into a $10 million empire before deciding to shift his focus and to focus on mental health advocacy. Parham, welcome on to the Thrive Time Show. How are you, sir?
I am well. Nice to be with you, Clay.
Hey, I am super excited to have you on the show here. And before we, you've had so much success, but I'd like to kind of go back to the beginning. How did life start out for you? Just tell us about your childhood.
Well, it was tough. So I was born in Iran and came to the U.S. when I was 1, when my dad went to undergrad and at a college in Oklahoma. I went back to Iran when I was 4. I was in Iran from the time I was 4 to 9. Then in 1979, the revolution happened. I think a lot of people are familiar with that, the Iran hostage crisis and whatnot. And then literally on a day's notice, we were packing up our bags, and my dad had already separated and left because of what was going on. And then me and my mom and my brother packed up our stuff and 8 suitcases and came through via Pakistan and the UK and ultimately ended up in the U.S. as refugees. And we received political asylum from the United States. So at this point, I was in 4th grade and basically began a path to try to assimilate and, become an American as fast as possible. And struggled. My dad struggled. We struggled financially, moved all over the place. In fact, I moved 11 different times until I graduated from high school. And that was basically the first 18 years, but went by really fast and it was really chaotic.
You moved 11 times, you said?
Well, I moved 11 times just from 4th grade to my senior year in high school.
Wow. Okay, so now let's go back here. I have never escaped a country that was under turmoil and traveled to another country and then another country en route to another country. How old were you when you packed up and did you say
so
you were...
I 9 years old.
Do you remember it?
Just started 4th grade.
Do you remember it?
I do. I do. I remember obviously all of the I remember all the memories of the actual things happening. I don't remember a lot of feelings. And we can talk about that later, but those are where all the suppressed feelings were. And that's where all the psychology came in my psychoanalysis to, kind of delve into those things. But basically, absolutely, I remember everything. I remember being on a train ride. I remember basically being in school one day, and the next day we're in Tehran awaiting to be, to fly out of Tehran International. The Iraq War was going on in Iran. That airport got bombed, so we could not fly out. And as a result, we basically had to escape with vehicles. We were on camels, essentially. We were in a train that had no windows and doors. With a bunch of smugglers, and it's just me, my mom, and my brother. So I remember all that stuff well, and it was scary.
When you were on a train without windows, how hot was it?
Well, it was cold actually. At the night, it was in the desert, so it'd get actually really cold, and we didn't have any water or food or anything. And in fact, it was snowing a little bit, and my mom would reach out and have this memory of trying to figure out ways for us to get just water. And we were packed in there like sardines with literally hundreds of smugglers, some bad people. And that was a result of Islamic Revolution. We were not Muslim, and so it was during a time where if you were in Iran and you were not Muslim, it was bad. It was really bad.
You've lived in America, obviously for a long time, and have built a big success for yourself. And you've been given an opportunity that so many people are given. But I think a lot of people have never lived over in the Middle East and have encountered these types of scenarios. Why is there such turmoil in the Middle East?
History plays a big role in it. It's the lack of democracy. I mean, some of it is honestly the lack of democracy. And so you have, groups that want to control things, and different people, different governments and different leaders and dictators control things through different ways. And in this case, they did it through the Islamic Revolution and basically, made Iran an Islamist state. And for, some people might remember, but during the 70s, Iran was very close allies with the U.S. Iran was very westernized, very progressive. It was growing. It was quite nice. And basically, a lot of people thought that, maybe the rich were getting too rich, or maybe they didn't want to be westernized, and they basically kind of wanted to go backwards. And in particular case with Iran, it was the perfect time for the Islamic Revolution, because they came in and said, hey, let's do it differently, and, kicked out the Shah. Another reason is they're kind of used to it. I've always believed this. This isn't based on, this is my opinion, but in some ways they are used to this type of turmoil, and you kind of just are desensitized to it. And in some ways it's just their way of living. You talk about like Palestinians in these different countries where they're just battling each other all the time. If they weren't fighting, I don't know what they would do. Their economies in some ways are based on that. They get paid by different people to fight. To me, it's just a lot of it is just habit. A lot of it's just habit, and a lot of it is just a view that the world should look differently, and it definitely should not look democratic.
Wow. Okay. So then you, how old were you when you figured out what you wanted to do professionally in America?
Well, initially I wanted to be a pilot, and that had to do with the plane ride from Iran to basically ultimately America. I was infatuated by airplanes, and I thought I'd want to be a pilot. And so when I went to college, I was at the Institute of Aviation at the University of Illinois, and I was, pursuing to be a pilot. But then I noticed that my one of my instructors was 30-some years old, and he's working for $10 an hour, just trying to accrue hours to eventually find a way and a path to the airlines. And I thought, whoa, I don't want to be 30 years old and still, grinding
right.
to build up hours, no differently than sometimes, you think about a doctor that's going to school for 15 years. I didn't want to do that. And I knew I kind of didn't really want to work for anybody. I learned that through the many little businesses that I had as a kid growing up, between mowing lawns and a lemonade stand and name it, I did it. And I knew I didn't want to work for anybody. So my eyes were always open to opportunities. And I was also a tennis pro at the time. And I had saved up, I think, around $70,000. And I had an opportunity to buy into a tire and auto facility, and knew nothing about the business, but I just knew I was good with people. And I just always believed, I don't care what I do, I'll make it work. And that was how I got in.
How old were you when you had saved up your first $70,000?
Well, I was a between junior and senior year in college.
What would you
I was
say
about
to
21-ish, I would say.
What would you say to people out there that struggle to save money?
Well, unfortunately, some of those things come from where you came from. So I lived in the projects at Joliet. I lived in subsidized housing. When I came to the U.S., my dad was working at convenience stores. He drove an MTD bus, which is the mass transit bus. We lived in a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartment most of my up until high school. So until I went to college was the first time my parents had when I was in Champaign, where I was living, a house. We lived in an apartment. And so money was kind of an important thing. I knew I hated being poor. So for me, it was easy. It was a function of just what I didn't want, and that was to be poor. And I think sometimes people because of their circumstances, maybe don't have that drive that I did to have that money to be able to put it to work. And I think that affects some things. And the other part is I think people they just sort of live week to week. They don't really have a master plan. They don't really think about like 5 years, 10 years. And the reason I was probably always doing that is because I just saw life differently. I came from Iran as a refugee, and all these things. I just saw life very differently, and I didn't see it as easy. And I always thought I've got to build a plan. So that maybe had something to do with it.
Did you have any rules that you live by? I mean, I grew up poor too, so my whole thing was I'm going to save all of it, and build my first company, DJConnection.com. Did you have any rules for saving? Did you just save all of it?
I didn't. I really didn't have any rules. I just had goals. I didn't really think of it in terms of rules and, like a percentage of what I made, et cetera. I just knew I wanted to buy a house when I finished college. I knew I wanted to be in a business, and it was just try to keep as much as possible. So, I mean, if there was anything with rules was, try not to spend. So I lived at home for most of my college. Yeah. I worked that's how I had the money. But I mean, I literally worked 60, 70 hours a week to make that money. In the summers, even more than that.
You don't need to hear it from me, but well done. I mean, so many people are given an opportunity. People don't realize what an opportunity we're given if we're born in this country or if we live in this country. I mean, it's just a unbelievable opportunity, and I just love
Clay,
stories.
We could talk for 2 hours about that, about the fact that how much I appreciate this country and how much sometimes people don't. It's a topic of much passion for me.
Well, I do have one thing, and this is not a political show, but it is a show where sometimes things need to be talked about that maybe could fall into the political category. But you have a lot of people that it seems like right now in our country who are willing to give up a lot of their individual freedoms for a bunch of free stuff, Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you've seen this. If you've studied history at all, we've all studied history. You see this. People are willing to give up some freedom for some free stuff, and a little bit more freedom for free stuff. What have you seen to have happened? I mean, I'm sure you've studied history as well. What tends to happen when people give up all their freedom for free stuff?
I'm not exactly sure I totally understand the question.
Well, when government's in control, what have you seen to happen? I've just never read a history book that has told me when government is in control, that's a good thing. I've just never seen it. Maybe you've read different history books, but I mean, did you feel like the government did a very good job when they were in charge where you grew up?
No. I think, I always wonder if some people are just different, where for me, everything was about, let me do it, let me figure it out. Let me give it a shot and try to put don't put handcuffs on me. Don't put bumpers around me. Let me go for it. And, I came from, and I saw especially countries that were completely in control, like especially right now in Iran. My entire family lives in Iran, and I watched the way they live. They are completely, they live and die by whatever the government is doing. They don't have a mobility. They don't have this ability to just say, if I'm really great, I'm really smart, I can do these things. It's just not available. And I think, it ultimately becomes a function of that. And I hope I understood your question correctly.
Oh, yeah. We have so few guests that are on the show that have done what you've done. You're one of my favorite guests because of your story. I mean, this is powerful, and I think somebody out there needs to hear this. I mean, this is powerful. So you were given this opportunity. You built a $10 million business. How did you get your first 10 customers?
Well, I was in the automotive retail. So basically how I got my first customers just kind of opened the door and hope that they came. But a little bit was different for me because I bought into an existing store that was struggling. And that was a great business lesson for me, is to get into something that was already doing really bad, because I had no choice but to really find operational techniques and ways to improve the business to get it. But I was at least lucky in the sense that I needed a lot more customers, but it wasn't like a sales call where I literally, enterprise kind of a customer. I got to go get 10 customers. It was just retail customers that walked in, but there was very few of them. And so how I went about doing it was purely with the thought that if I make this one person that walks in elated, because they're already walking into a business that they hate, which is the automotive business. You hate going into automotive. But if I just absolutely blow them away, I am sure, I don't know when, I am sure a second customer will become as a result of this guy or this woman. I just didn't know when that second person would be referred and come. And so that was the mentality that I had. I literally just took every single customer that I had one at a time. And I did that even when I was, we were fixing 200,000 cars a year at the end. And I still had that mentality. Every single one matters. That was it. That's how I built it. Just literally thinking about one customer at a time.
That's a powerful teaching moment out there. I have so many people that ask me at our workshops, what's the key to great customer service? I said, well, you have the mindset like you're never going to have another customer. Like this is the only one you have, and you better wow them. And then you do that thousands and thousands of times, and you build something big. And I just that is awesome. So I
used to use the expression with my employees that think about a cubicle. Think about this person that comes into your work and is going to go back to their work. Is going to go to maybe to an office, a cubicle or something, and they're going to be like, wait, where were you at or whatever? I was getting my car done. What were they doing? Where'd you go? And they're going to talk about it, especially if they had a good experience. And unfortunately, it's like any disease that spreads really rapidly. I was under the belief that this would also spread rapidly if you really handled everyone the best you can. You weren't perfect, but you just had to show the customer that you really, you didn't pretend to care, but you really cared.
Now, when did you feel like you were starting to get enough traction where it was no longer scary, or did you ever feel like that?
It's such a good question because I sold my company about 3 years ago, which actually 3 years ago this February. Wow. But it really wasn't till about 5 or 6 years prior to that, and I've been doing it for 24 years, where I really felt like the balance sheet was starting to look better because I particularly had a lot of ups and downs. And so during the 90s, I had the one store, then I got to my second store, and money was cheap. Banks were just loaning you money just because you asked for it. They could care less what, there was no real good math behind it. It was just, they were just loaning out money. And so I was just opening stores. And I immediately went to 10 stores. I was 26 years old, and wow. I was going to grad school at the same time and running 10 stores, and I ran them into the ground. I mean, I just destroyed them. Didn't do a very good job. Didn't have any structure. Went back down to 3 stores. And then little by little rebuilt again with a little bit of a purpose and everything that I had learned. So really by the time really things started clicking in the sense that I could count on this net income every month, and I could count on growing. And if this store loses a little bit of money, I can count on that I can make those decisions and handle a new store or a new acquisition not doing well. And that was only probably 5-6 years prior to me selling the company.
Well, before we get into your new book, Perfect Pain, I had two more quick questions for you about your business. Location. You had 18 dealerships at one point. You had an 8-figure exit. Things were good. But a lot of times people think, I'm going to move into a big city, and that's where the money's going to be made. The big city. I understand you had kind of a different strategy as it related to location. Could you share with us about this?
Yeah, I mean, I had 2 views on location. So initially, when you're going into a new market, and I was sort of, all of the general stores I was in were towns of 50, 100,000 people. And mainly because I felt like you could, if you were really, really good, you could really stand out. And that's just kind of where I started. So I knew about it. But I had 2 different views of location. And that is that when it's early and it's a new store, a new market, it's okay to pay a little bit more for a great location because that visibility, the traffic count, those things really come to play. And they will at least get you those first 10 customers, like you say. They will at least get you that walk-in, which ultimately leads that if you do a good operational job and you have a good process in place, that customer will eventually come back. So you just kind of naturally get these customers. And so the money that you spend on a location is worth it. But as I got better at it, depending on where I was at, I didn't need to have a great location, and the sort of the ROI on and spending a lot of money on a great location didn't matter, because if I had a really good reputation, then that customer would drive an extra mile away or would go, it doesn't need to be an A property. It could be a B- property that you're paying 30% less for. So then all of a sudden your rent and occupancy costs and all those fixed costs are 30% less. And without giving up anything. So depending on where I was at, what market I was in, I always balanced those 2 things. But I felt they were just equally important sometimes to spend and get the A property. And sometimes I already had a good reputation. For example, in Champaign, I had 3 stores and we kind of owned this market and were really good at it and had a great reputation. It didn't matter where I put a store.
With Google optimization working the way it does now, I love
A-list locations with the armpit store. I call it the armpit store, but it's the one where it's like, we have one of my businesses, Elephant in the Room, is tucked away behind this nice Italian restaurant, but it's on a busy corner. And because of Google, we come up top in Google when you look for Tulsa men's haircuts. But because we're in the space nobody wants at the A-list location, it's a lot cheaper. And there's kind of that balance, of doing that. Yeah. I love your wisdom on that. Now, I wanted to ask you about this.
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah, go for it.
I will tell you, in my real estate business, which is I own commercial real estate and strip malls,
yep.
I only like to be in the A location. And that is a play where I'd rather pay more and be in that top corner. And that's just a play on a defensive play on that. At the end of the day, if the economy changes or there's slowdowns, that it's gonna the A's that circle around the A is gonna probably still at least be okay rather than the B ring and the C ring.
I will say this for the listeners out there that don't know this. What Parham just said is absolute wisdom, and I might go back and listen to that twice if you're thinking about buying commercial real estate, because what you just said, the economy is going to have ups and downs. Hopefully not complete overthrows of the government like what you dealt with as a kid. But when the economy goes up and down, things change. That ring around the A-list locations is so powerful. It really does maintain its value better. And to learn more about this, I'd encourage you to listen to that twice. Now, Parham, hiring good people. So many of our listeners are business owners, and they have a great business plan. They have a great location, great business plan, great marketing, great website, great branding, great, the word great, a lot of the word great. It's like a Donald Trump rally. Great, beautiful, great. But they have horrible people.
Yeah.
Bad people. People that don't want to be there. People that quit but keep showing up for the paycheck. How important is it to find good people?
So, Clay, for anybody that knows me, people that go to my stores, they've always asked me this question. Vendors, manufacturers, they're like, how do you always have such good people? And so I have two rules. One is I always would tell them that, I don't always have good people, but I never keep bad people, no matter what. That was sort of like a rule number one, that I'd rather be shorthanded than to have one person that's just a gap fill that does a crappy job of being the representative of who I am in my business. So that was rule number one. So we never had bad people.
Yeah.
Second part was, in my particular business, it made it really easy to find a competitive advantage that people miss. And I consult with other shops all the time, and they think about money when they think about employees. It was the one area of my net, it was the one area of my P&Ls that I can tell you this, Clay, I never paid attention to it. Of course, I knew what my labor cost was.
Yeah.
But it wasn't something that I'd be like, we got to get that down 1 point. We got to get that down 1.5 points because that's 100,000. It's just something I never did. And the reason I never did that, because I never wanted to be influenced of who I hire based on of trying to fit the percentage of the P&Ls to be at 22%, which is the great labor rate. I didn't want to do that. And so I always paid extra. So from the beginning, I was about a 10 to 20% premium of whatever the market was doing. I paid 10% to 20% more. That was a rule. Now, it was very difficult early on to do that because I did it at the cost of, first of all, me not making any money. But I knew that people in the automotive business, the way to differentiate is great people, because if you have good people fixing your cars and doing it right and doing it with a smile and looking like they care, you will go back. So if a customer comes back, you are 100% guaranteed to eventually, I don't know when, it might be 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year before you get this cycle working, but you know it's going to happen because those people are good at what they do. And then that just built on a culture. So for me, it just became our culture. We, even in times when it was hard to hire people, it was difficult to hire technicians, we used to have, kind of a waiting list in some ways. We never really had a difficulty hiring because everybody wanted to work for us. And the reason they wanted to work for us is because my number one goal was to treat my employees as if they were customers. If I treated my employees like they were customers, then they'll have no choice but to treat my customers the best. Make sense?
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And you grew this, just for some context. Before you sold, you had 18 dealerships. 18
That's
dealerships.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's all. That's just yes, from Iran to America, from saving $70,000 before graduating college to building an 18 location facility, a business, people might say, "Oh man, you've got it easy." And but then you write this book called Perfect Pain. What's this book, Perfect Pain, all about, and how could you possibly be experiencing pain after all this gain?
Oh, well, so what's interesting about what you just said is that, yes, looking back, and I appreciate that, it was a nice run, and yeah, I accomplished some things. And the crazy part was about a better part of a decade of this, I kind of did it with one hand because I had anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 a week cocaine habit. Had a massive depression problem, but not in the sense that you would lock yourself up and be sad. Everybody that knew me knew that I was the life of the party. In high school, I was homecoming king. I had so many really great things going for me, but at the end of the day, I hadn't really resolved all my childhood conflicts. And so I was abused when I was a child. I didn't tell you that. So when I was in Iran, I was sexually abused for a year of my life. And all these things, moving 11 times, coming from Iran to America, parents that I didn't really connect with, all these things kind of went into this pot and ultimately manifested in very destructive behavior to the point, I wanted to kill myself. And it was just really, 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 really bad. So I started getting help and I got therapy, psychoanalysis. And, one day I basically got to a point, and this is where, I started writing the book, was that I'm so grateful that I had all these bad things happen. Like I was like, wow, thank God I was abused when I was a kid. Thank God I had this, learned this language and learned to assimilate with Americans on a dime. Thank God I went from 10 stores to 3 stores. Thank God I, had a $2,000 a week cocaine habit. Thank God that all of these really what people would perceive as negative things that happened to me, because if I hadn't had those things happen, I wouldn't be the person I am. I wouldn't be talking to you, Clay. And that's why I felt that. And the title of the book came to my head, and it was A Perfect Pain, because the pain that I had was quite perfect in the sense that it just needed to be, and it was part of who I was. And then I learned to not be ashamed of the abuse. I learned to, become stronger. Everything that I did that you just mentioned as, wow, that's great, it was all built out of insecurity. Of not really liking myself. So I built everything. I did try to make money because I thought money would solve my insecurities. I thought I wouldn't have shame from being an immigrant from Iran. I thought money and all these things would sort of heal all that, but in fact they made it worse. Hence the $2,000 a week cocaine habit. But once I got things under control, once I learned about myself, things got better, and that's where I felt that I needed to put this book out and a message to other people that depression is real, getting help is real, and admitting that you need help is even more real and extremely important. So
you were able to immigrate from Iran to the United States. You overcame drug addiction and sexual abuse en route to growing an 18 dealership business that you sold for $10 million, and now that you have the money in the bank, you've decided you want to spend your time helping people learn about what?
I want people to be honest, and more importantly, be really honest with their insecurities. People don't want to talk about depression. People don't want to talk about mental health, right? But they're perfectly happy to talk about, them going to the gym and working on their body, or them, doing rehab on their knee or things like that. But nobody wants to talk about doing rehab or doing work on their psyche and their mental health. And everywhere I turn, everywhere I turn, I see entrepreneurs, I see people that are doing things what I believe for the wrong reasons. So they're workaholics, and I think, what are you hiding? What are you trying to not think about? And a lot of times that I run into entrepreneurs and very successful entrepreneurs, and of course, just being an entrepreneur, I'm always around entrepreneurs. And a lot of them, I find that, everything is great. I'm doing great. We're going to get it. We're going to make more money. We're going to do this. And, and I just think, what are you warding off? What painful stuff are you warding off that you're not dealing with? Because that just doesn't make sense to me. This insane ambition that you have. Now, if it's organized, it does, but you can just tell. So I just think people are afraid to talk about it. And I thought, I'm in a power position. I'm in a position where I can say, look, I was abused. I was sexually abused by another male. And I don't have a problem saying that. And that's why I want to do it. I want to sort of empower people to be completely open about their insecurities or blemishes that they have. We never talk about, like you mentioned Donald Trump. It was kind of funny, but I like a lot of things he does, by the way. But the fact that everything is always great with him, that's just annoying. Right? I like to sometimes say, you know what, I messed up.
I want to shift gears and talk about the reality of being self-employed for a moment. What time do you typically wake up each and every day?
Today was 4:30 because I'm also an options trader. So if you know, the market's been awful this week, and it's been a very scary week. And so, I'm up at 4:30 watching Bloomberg and watching the overnight markets in China and et cetera. But generally speaking, really early, 4:35.
Do you make more money than you lose on your investing?
Yes.
Okay. You have a strategy?
Not this week.
Not this week. Okay.
No, I have. There's about a 3-4 day period every year that's challenging. We're in one right now. The last one was February of 2018, almost exactly 2 years ago. And those are difficult months in options trading. But holistically, I've done well. It's one of the reasons I decided to kind of get out of the business too. I felt like I could make a pretty good living doing options trading without 200 employees.
What was the most number of employees you had on your team?
About 200.
200? Okay, 200. What would be your advice to anybody out there that's struggling to manage a team of 200 people? What's your tip? I know you mentioned hiring great people. What would be your tip?
Be really engaged, but be really engaged on a human level. Don't ever think whether you're a boss of 3 or a boss of 10 or a boss of 200. Don't be a boss. Be a leader. Never be afraid to do every single thing that you ask any employee to do. Again, that one is fairly cliche, but I did it. I mean, I would run stores. Even when I think I had 10 stores at one point, I had opened a new test store that was focused on tires. And I actually went every day with the key, opened it up and closed it for 1 year. And I had, 90 employees at that time or something, but I did that. And I, A, wanted to show them that I could do that. B, that I'm right there with them. I'd put on the shoes that get dirty and get oily and wear the pants, and I would just do everything that they did. And so I really, really was engaged with them. I knew who their wives were, who their kids were. It got harder as it got bigger, but I really made that a priority, and it wasn't fake. I genuinely cared about people and who they were, but I also knew that at the same time it would reap benefits, because as you grow, you can't watch everybody, right? So when you have 5 employees, you can watch them and you can quality control, let's call it, right? But when you have 10 employees, it gets a little harder for 10 employees. When you have 50 and they're in 3 different markets, even harder. Yep. When they're at 100 in 3 different states, it's even more 100. Like, how do I know that guy in Iowa is fighting for me every day? So the only way I could really know that is for them to know me and know that I'm just a regular guy. I'm not this guy that's sitting in some office with his feet up smoking a cigar and being like, wow, look at the money I'm making. I'm like just a regular guy. I came from tough means, and I make sure that they know all these things about me, and I also try to know about them.
What would be, if you're sitting down with somebody in America today, because I'm a white guy, I grew up without money, but I grew up in this country, So I just got a job at Applebee's, I got a job at Target, I got a job at DirecTV. I had 3 jobs. I had the triple threat, Applebee's, Target, and DirecTV, and I just thought, you know what? I'm going to work these 3 jobs, and I'm going to save up money, and I'm going to do it. And I wasn't really upset about it. I just realized, hey, this is a great opportunity. For some reason, I've always looked at this as a land of opportunity. But a lot of people say that this country does not create opportunities. But you've seen countries where there's just not opportunities. What would you say to somebody out there who says that this is not a land of opportunity, this country of America?
Well, basically I would say is they have the type of mind that's looking for why things don't work, as opposed to why and how you can make things work. And whether that comes from fear, whether that comes from who knows what. But I just basically always tell them, hey, go to Iran, get on an airplane and go to the Middle East, get on an airplane, go to Europe in some places. It's not even the U.S. I'm like, we really came from nothing. It's not made up. I mean, when I say there was no seed money, there was nothing. It was really nothing. Someone can argue, well, you had nothing to lose. Well, I think a lot of people could be in the same position that they don't have anything to lose. So you might as well go for it. But I think just people look at the glass half empty, and they just always want to find an excuse why something doesn't work. And it pisses the hell out of me.
Well, somebody out there is saying, hey, you know what? I want to buy the book, Perfect Pain. I want to, but It's like $20 on Amazon, and I have carpal tunnel. I have anxiety when it comes to clicking. I'm not a clicker. I don't like the clicking sound. I have to go buy a burrito later today. I've got so much on my schedule. I'm a reader. I believe that the readers are the leaders. I believe the note takers are the money makers. Why should everybody pick up a copy of your book, Perfect Pain?
Well, because I think everybody, and I can attest to this from the people that reviewed it and people that email me still all the time, is that everybody has a connection to it because everybody suffers a little bit of depression. Everybody suffers from a little bit of insecurity, and everybody is not completely honest with themselves. And so when people read this book, what they always email me or they write to me and say is like, I cannot believe how vulnerable you sound and you can put yourself out there and how honest depiction that you're able to lay out. And I think what the reason they should read it is that I want people to get a glimpse into how powerful that can be to be so blatantly honest and vulnerable. But secondly is that, gosh, look where I came from. I didn't have a lot of great things happen to me by definition, especially growing up. Most people didn't come from Iran as a refugee, move 11 times, be abused, all these things. And so don't use it as an excuse. So hopefully that you read it and you're inspired that you can overcome stuff. You can have a $2,000 a week cocaine habit and be blissfully happy at some point in your life. It does not have to be the way it is.
You are just a blasty blast and a laser show of just knowledge bombs. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time to invest and helping our listeners out there, because I know that you've made that money. You've worked hard for that money. You could be doing other things right now. You could be sipping Mai Tais right now, my friend. You could be, doing whatever, but you taking the time out of your schedule. You could be not simultaneously doing a podcast while sipping Mai Tais. But thank you so much, my friend. I really do appreciate you.
Listen, you do a great job. I got to listen to a lot of your shows, and you're doing a great job. Keep it up, and it's been a pleasure being on your show.
Hey, you take care.
Thank you, Clay.
And now, without any further ado, 3, 2, 1, boom!
Boom. Boom.